Welcome to We and Lewis, a podcast dedicated to celebrating the remarkable, creative, and energetic people who live in Lewis and are helping our community forge a collective soul as appealing as it is unique. These are their stories and their words. They are the we in Lewis. I'm your host, Kevin McGinnis. Our guest today is Mario Pino, who somehow managed to create a career that spanned playing the trumpet, software engineering, and now sculpture. He has a long history as a show orchestra member for people like Frank Sinatra, Tony Bennett, Diana Ross, Tom Jones, and Paul Anka. He's worked the Strip in Vegas, Broadway productions like the revival of Guys and Dolls, My Fair Lady, Annie, and Legally Blonde. Somehow, he also found time to be the jazz band director at Villanova and then on into software engineering. He's well known in the jazz and classical music communities and currently is with Sodello, the Southern Delaware Orchestra. No, Steve, not the restaurant group, Sodello. Today's episode is brought to you by our good friends at the Leanne Wilkinson Group of Berkshire Hathaway Home Services, PenFed Realty. No one knows the Lewis market like Leanne. Just as importantly, no one knows what's coming on the market like Leanne. She and her team make buying, selling, or just searching for the perfect home to start a family or create a memorable grandchild visit easy. As I can personally attest, having bought 2 homes and sold one with them, they're terrific. For those who live here, the reason's no secret. No one works harder than Leanne. No one. And yet somehow she still finds the time to be one of the primary supporters and sponsors of an amazing list of charitable organizations throughout the Lewis area, including this podcast. Mario, welcome to the show.
Welcome. Thank you for having me.
I should note that for the first time, Steve, our incredible engineer, is mic'd up, so you will be able to hear his asides and questions. It's a very exciting moment for the podcast and only took 3 years of therapy and one gun. Welcome, my friend.
Thank you.
They say there are no overnight sensations in show business. How did you get to the point where you were playing with Sinatra and Tony Bennett?
Luck. Lots of hard work, lots of sort of blind ambition, and a few just really good, lucky moments where people said, "I'd like to make you part of this." And so yeah, you're right. There's nothing overnight about it, but lots of luck.
Did you move to Vegas and then start getting jobs, or were you getting jobs and going to Vegas?
No, I worked in the Philadelphia, New York, Atlantic City area out of college, and I was doing trying to put together a living as kind of a freelance musician, and I worked in a theater where the acts would come in and they would bring in core musicians, and coincidentally, it was almost the same group of core musicians with each act, and many of them were from Las Vegas, so you start befriending them and having conversation, and they recommended I consider moving to Las Vegas. So I moved to Las Vegas in '89. Started working fairly immediately, and then there was a big union strike, which changed the complexion of the industry dramatically, and that was really the catalyst for me to go full-time into my technology, realizing that I needed to supplement with technology, and it actually ended up being the opposite. Music supplemented my technology career.
Are stars different? In other words, are there some you interact with when you're playing behind them or with them? Some you try never to be really visible to them? How did you learn how to balance the people you were dealing with?
I just watched the older musicians as a young man and took the cues off of them. And some of those older musicians can be quite salty, and they wouldn't interact with the stars unless absolutely necessary. They would just come in, do their job, and leave. Every now and then you would have some sort of interaction. I found that there was a little more interaction when I lived in Las Vegas, for the simple reason that many of the stars or celebrities that we played for, in fact, lived in Las Vegas. So there was a little bit more of a community. It wasn't just yet another road gig. So it's maybe not as glamorous as people think, that you sit and chit chat all the time. It's people are busy, and in some cases, people would just prefer to do their work and move on.
Who were some of the favorite people you played with?
I always liked Tony Bennett a lot, and aside from was a great singer, he was just a really nice man. Always seemed to be friendly to the orchestra, and he was an artist as well. He was a painter, so I really appreciated that there's multiple talents. But he was just a really nice man.
Were there some that would come in and sort of include you? I mean, they would talk to you. Is there, the one they would? How many? I don't know how often they would rehearse, but would they kind of interact with you? And that's
with the in Las Vegas, where it's very well, and not necessarily in Las Vegas, where you would see these people regularly. If you saw them enough, they would sometimes say, "Hey," and as if they recognized you, and it's good to see you, and I'm sure they did. They just didn't recall our names. Some of the stars, like for instance, Don Rickles used to include the orchestra as part of his bit, so he would actually sort of befriend the orchestra.
Did you ever get shot at by?
Oh, frequently.
Really?
Yeah, frequently. We had a trumpet section one time. It was made up of people with all Italian last names. And he turned around and looked at the trumpet section, and he announced this as the only trumpet section still in the witness protection plan. So, that was... There you have it.
It's amazing. His material still works. I mean, and you think when you listen to some of the stuff he got away with now, you're like, are you kidding me? But it worked for him because he didn't really respect anyone.
He was really a nice man. My interactions with him always off stage where he was just a very, very nice person. He had his shtick, and it worked.
And I just was always amazed. Everyone was so deferential to Johnny Carson, and he would go onto that show and just crap all over Carson all the time. Like, am I talking too fast, Johnny? Do you want to keep up? It's just unbelievable. Many of us played, and I use that term loosely, an instrument as a kid. If we ever had to play in public, we lived in mortal fear of making a mistake. At your level, I assume that's no longer even a consideration.
With me, I mean, I can't speak for others, but for me, it's always a consideration. As a matter of fact,
really,
I have to really kind of put it in the back of my head so that it doesn't get in the way. You're always striving for excellence, and things happen, and so you really it's for me, it never just goes away. It's always something I have to consider and deal with.
Did you ever make one?
Oh, more than one.
When you make a mistake on the trumpet, is it you're missing a note or making a screech, or what is the mistake?
Well, I think the worst thing you can do is to be shy about your mistakes, because when you're performing, you don't want to perform in a shy way. You want to be bold. So if you make a mistake, it's a big one. You just try to make the mistakes in rehearsal and things like that. So when the performance is there, it's good.
When you go to a show, there's that moment when the lights go down, the lights dim, the room falls quiet, and then the music starts. It's kind of a magical moment. There's excitement. The anticipation is physical. You can feel it. What's it like for you?
It's a really interesting question. I think when I was a very young musician and I played for the first time, I got caught up in that moment. And what I didn't realize is the orchestra is a big contributor to that moment. So I had to be very attentive to the needs. I just couldn't observe. So a lot of times, if sort of the curtain goes up, the orchestra's playing, and you really have to be on your toes. So you It's a business, and so you don't always have the opportunity to enjoy that uh, feel that the audience should be having.
Doing a show every night, sometimes multiple times, it's hard work, both physically and mentally. How do you prepare?
I think the biggest way you prepare is not overthink. That's for me. So you go to it kind of with a clean slate each show, and there is a discipline to it, because if you're doing multiple shows across a longer period of time, you can get fatigued from it, mentally and in some cases physically fatigued. So taking days off appropriately is a really good idea. But you just kind of approach it like I try to approach it like it's the first time I've ever played it. It's a little game I play with myself, and it seems to work.
Well, obviously it did.
Yeah.
Do you ever get to the point, though, where you're playing and it's a little bit on autopilot? You've done it so many times, your body, it becomes almost like breathing to your body. You're just playing away, and your mind is not always right there at that moment.
Sure. I try to stay away from that when I catch myself doing it, because what happens with me is when I'm like that, it's easy to fall into bad habits. And then that can snowball for me. So I try to really be attentive where possible, but, it does happen.
But at some point, it's 8:05, you're playing the same note as you played for the last 3 weeks at 8:05. Is that right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Do you practice when you're in a show and you're going every 5 nights a week, 6 nights a week, or do you still practice on other things?
I do, but it's a different type of practicing. It's more of I think it would be analogous to an athlete who does a lot of stretching in preparation for the event, and just kind of keeping the flexibility, elasticity in your playing, and things like that. So you're not practicing in the same way that you would if you had 3 or 4 weeks off.
Do you have to be careful if you're playing the same music and nothing else for a long period of time? I think that you mentioned there's a term for it.
Yeah, we used to call it show chops, and it when you're playing the same music night after night for really long periods, and in some cases, some Broadway shows may go for a decade or so, and it's easy to be able to play that show, but nothing else. So you just, again, that's that practicing that kind of keeps you flexible, it keeps you aware, time off to do other things, to keep some diversity in what you're doing, not only physically but mentally. So it's the best in our business really have that balance handled really well.
If you're playing a show every night, do you then do something else during the day? I mean, in other words, were you going to be doing another performance in another forum, another factor during the day?
I mean, you can. It just really depends. In the daytime, you go to the bank, you go shopping, maybe play some golf, or maybe not. And so I think it's just like anyone else. When you handle your life when your time off.
Now, an orchestra is a group of people, and so there's going to be a personal dynamic to the group of people. Is it considered in this world real success when the audience is unaware of the individuals of the orchestra and just hear the totality of the sound?
I think so. I mean, the orchestra is sort of like a pipe organ or a piano. We're there to make a kind of a single voice made up of maybe 75, 80 people, and so I think you can consider it a success when you have an ensemble sound versus an individual sound, unless the piece calls for an individual sound.
Did you have solos ever?
Yeah,
Do
absolutely.
you stand? What happens?
I try not to. I really try. I'm shy.
We're catching now onto that. Yeah. On a sports team, you have a team, but you have stars.
Yeah.
Is that true with an orchestra or a show band?
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. You have people that have almost separate careers from the orchestra. I mean, in Las Vegas, we had a famous trombone player. His name was Carl Fontana. If you look him up, you'll see many jazz recordings of him on it. And was a very celebrated jazz trombonist. But he played in the show orchestras because it afforded him a regular living. And he would take time off and do tours. And so he was truly a star amongst, within the orchestra.
But the audience might not know that.
That's sort of, I think he enjoyed that.
He enjoyed that?
I think he did.
Also, if you're dealing with a group of you said 70 people a moment ago, were there musicians you played with every night that you just didn't like personally, but when it became performance time, none of that mattered?
I think so. I mean, I think it's just like any other work environment. As when I left the industry and found myself in an office setting, there were people that were, really enjoyable, and then there were some folks that were just kind of quiet into themselves, and I think the same dynamic exists.
Shows at casinos are meant to look glamorous. They're always, especially in Vegas, they're over the top. What was the reality behind the scenes?
A lot of work to make that illusion happen. I worked for one of the hotels in a non-musical capacity in the convention portion of the community of the hotel, and after each convention, the staff would be on their hands and knees painting and fixing little bumps and bruises in the surbase.
Seriously?
To make so that the next convention would feel like it was a brand spanking new event center. And so there was just a lot of people doing a lot of really hard work and good work to make that illusion a reality for folks.
Does it sort of like stop at the curtain? I mean, you see the sets, you see all of this stuff. It's all very glamorous, and then on the other side of the curtain, there's duct tape. There's people running around crazy.
Yeah, I think so. And I think there's something there. The audience, there's a sort of a contract between the performers and the audience. The audience wants a magic, and will help you in creating that magic if they think it's worth helping you.
When you do you feel the audience when they come in?
Yeah, you definitely can feel when the audience is connected, I think, with you, and sometimes when they're not as connected.
Now, while you were working in Vegas, you were also working in New York. Is that right?
Actually, I had done some work in New York prior to moving to Las Vegas, and it was very casual work. Sometimes we'd go up early on and play in the Copacabana, which I don't even know if it's still there, and do some acts and shows. And one time I had to go up to New York to audition for the road tour of Annie, and I think Sarah Jessica Parker was the Annie at the time. So this is going back a few years, early 80s, I think. And it was the best lesson for me in humility, because I went up, I played, and then some time passed, and the gentleman called me to, I believe, offer me the job. And I started, as sort of a young, cocky guy, I started stipulating my involvement. And that was not the right thing to do. So, needless to say, I didn't get the job, but I learned a big lesson. And so it was worth, kind of reflecting on that.
My first job was in an audit in a greenhouse taking care of geraniums, which is kind of humorous in its own right. And I was very young. I remember before I went in for the interview, my father said, "Get the job first before you speak." It's like, I've never forgotten that. Like you'll be doing an interview and you feel yourself, "No, we don't need to share that right now. You can tell them what they're wrong about later."
Good advice.
Is it hard to get a job as a musician as it is for an actor?
That's a great question. I don't know, but I do know it's very difficult to get a job as a musician in a way that you can make a living. And I still have a few friends that do it and do it very, very well. And they're marvelous, marvelous players. Very likable people. And they always deliver. But it's difficult. It really is. And it's become more and more difficult with instruments like the trumpet because those acoustic instruments are not as widely used as they maybe once were. In the movie soundtracks are done anywhere in the world. It's our economy is I believe we live in a hyper-competitive economy, and that brings about a lot of diversity and a lot of opportunity for a lot of people, and it changes the complexion of how you go about handling your living as a musician.
Are more shows pre-recorded now?
There's still recordings for shows. I mean, back in like the 60s and the 70s, maybe even before, they would do recordings for every weekly show. And so that was a heyday for those types of musicians, if I'm not mistaken. It's just a very difficult.
No, what I meant is, do they use instead of having you live band, would you use a recording?
Oh, excuse me.
Yeah.
That has happened, where they will record it in advance and use the recording as the track. Sometimes they'll use it. I've seen where it's been used together with a live band. Yes, that happens.
In some ways, is a Broadway performance easier than a Vegas show? Or is it the reverse?
I think they're both really hard. There's some very, very difficult Broadway shows. There's some very difficult Vegas shows. It's the act of being precise night after night, show after show. Sometimes these things are written in such a way that they exceed the more traditional boundaries of the instrument, but that's your job to figure out and make it work. So I think they're both they can be both quite difficult.
All performers have sets, games, performances that stand out from the others that you remember. Was this true for you?
Yeah, I guess so. Oddly enough, the performances that stand out in my mind were not on the showroom floor. In Las Vegas, we had a really large union hall, and it had a full, kind of like a nightclub with a stage. So what would happen is, after we were done the show, we would go to the union, and there was a full bar there, so you can enjoy your evening. And bands would play all night long, and it was a great place for young players who were coming to town to show their skills to the various music contractors. It was an audition in some cases, but it was also a place to play the music you enjoy. And there were some amazing performances done there, and the music was extraordinary and many times written by many of the musicians. So you really had an opportunity to play some fresh music and play it with really some of the best people in the world.
If you could have your choice, what type of music would you play? Because you have a very prominent reputation in the classical community, but also obviously in a band orchestra.
You know, the thing I've discovered about myself over the years is I really like to create. I'm a much better creator than a recreator of situations. So I really enjoy doing things that are fresh and new and have a new voice to them, as much as I do sort of the tried and true pieces that we all have grown to love and know, and things like that. So I think that's what's drawn me to my art, is I really enjoy, at whatever level it is, creating something that's mine.
Because I guess when if you're an orchestra in Vegas or something like that, you're recreating somebody else's work. You're not expected to go in on a given night and riff. You're not supposed to change things. You have a very set thing you're supposed to do, and you have to do it for everybody else. Is that right?
Absolutely. I mean, that music is written in such a way as to enhance the performer's act. So you really, taking liberties is not what you do. That's all what happens in the rehearsal, really. The rehearsal is more a roadmap of how and when things happen than it is an opportunity to rehearse the music. I used to work in a theater in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, called Host Farms, and the contractor was wonderful. And we would play these Borscht Belt comedians, and they would come in with their music, and the contractor said, we're not going to play a note, but you're going to explain the roadmap of what you want when you want it, and it'll be there tonight. And it used to kind of rattle some of the performers because they weren't used to that. But it was a really good bunch of folks who played. And so we had no problems with the music. It was just like, when do you want the drum to go ba-da-boom after the joke, and when do you want this fanfare to occur, and the timing of it, and it always worked out.
If you're doing a play or a Broadway show or a musical, there are going to be good performances and not so good performances. And when you get to know the material as well as I'm assuming you're going to get to know it, will you be sitting there while the spoken part is going on and you're like, oh, that's wrong?
It's funny when, the first few performances, I find myself really paying a lot of attention to the music and ignoring spoken language on stage. And then as you play it, you get really familiar with it, and you start picking up like the humor, the nuanced humor and things like that. The performers are quite good, and they rehearse it for a long time. There aren't too many times I've gone like, oh, that's not the right place for that line. So fortunately, and so they're very well rehearsed, and they're very skilled. And we have a theater nearby, the Milton Theater, and they bring in actors and singers, performers from elsewhere, and they're beautifully rehearsed. They do a great job.
And do you reach a certain point with stars that they're given an enormous amount of leeway by the audience because they want them to be wonderful? We went and saw Kath. I don't know how Kath pulled this off, but we went out and saw Bette Midler. She was herself. She was at least what we thought was herself, because she was playing along, and there was one thing where she was singing and she was having to dance, and in the middle of it, she just stopped and leaned over on her hands on her knees and was like taking deep breaths, and the whole thing's going on around her. And then she looked at the audience, kind of shrugged, and then went back into it and so on. And everyone cheered because you kind of want them to succeed.
Yeah,
you want them to live up to your image of who they are.
I think so. To me, that's really, I like that rapport when stars have that. When some stars come out, or some entertainers come out and they do their thing and that's it. And then other people have a rapport beyond their singing or their dancing or whatever. I remember playing Shirley Bassey. I don't know if you remember her. Mm-hmm. She was one of the early singers of the James Bond movie. I think it was Goldfinger she sang. And people were just waiting for her to say those Goldfinger words. They just couldn't wait. And when she sang it, the place just went crazy. So I think that, again, is that contract that the audience
right.
has with the performer. They want to see you succeed. We actually see that in our amateur playing, with Sudello. People just they want us to succeed. You can feel it. They want us to do the best we can do.
Does playing with Sodello sort of scratch an itch for you?
It does. It scratches an itch that I've had for a long time in the area of arts management, and trying to understand how to make sure an organization like that could properly be funded, more than it scratches a performance itch. I head up the outreach division, so one of my concerns is that this legacy of performance gets passed on to younger people. They get to experience it and then figure out if and what they want to do with it. And so I'm a big fan of giving younger players an opportunity to sit in those chairs, and if I can, support them maybe with some business acumen, if you will. And so, yeah, that's sort of the itch that allows me to scratch.
Mario, I'm by no means a musician. I guess two-part question for you. Do you have one or two really favorite musicians? And I'm thinking more singers, but we'll keep it broad. And how do you feel when you see them end of career and they're still trying to do it, but they're not quite making it?
Yeah. My favorite female singer has to be Barbra Streisand. I just love the way she sang, and I loved her musicality. She really understood the music, or understands the music, excuse me. And there are just hundreds and thousands of great singers, but she's just one that I kind of grew up with. And in my trumpet playing, I always try to emulate a singing voice, because after all, that's what these instruments are, really. We sang first, and then we decided to invent a trumpet, so it's really, to me, it's and we study lyrical studies and vocalises and things like that, so that we can be more vocal like. As far as I'm sort of wrestling with the second part of your question myself. I see things that are kind of not there. And so recently I've had to make a decision about what I want to do with my playing. And also, I think it's important that we change and be different, and we have different ways to contribute to the same cause. And sometimes, this is a bad generalization, but I'm going to say it, is I think sometimes we run the risk of believing we are what we do, and when we can no longer do it, we are no longer, that's not right. So I try to think of it like, what's next? And so I don't walk into it with my head down. I walk into it with my head up, kind of thing. So I hope that answered your question.
Was it economics that got you into software design?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. My wife and I didn't want to move to Los Angeles. We didn't want to move to New York. I felt I saw some writing on the wall. And I had some other interests too. I was kind of a tinkerer, and I really fell into it. But it ended up being it started off in software development and design. It ended up being in, moved to network architecture. I managed a pretty large team of people we would send all over the country, and just some brilliant people. I was really fortunate to work with. And then I found myself, I really like people. So I found myself kind of gravitating to a more sales related, and I felt I could represent sales well, because there was always a big divide between the people who do the work and the people that sold the work. So I thought I could maybe bring that a little closer.
And for the people doing the work, there's always that marvelous eye roll when the salespeople come in. Oh boy, here we go.
Yeah. We used to have a guy in the sales office, and he, hopefully jokingly, would pick up the yellow pages, which is a reference from the past, and he would hold it up in front of all these people and say, "Nobody touch my customers." So it was, the salespeople are an interesting breed, and I think they serve a really valuable purpose. And sometimes the needs of the customer sometimes are a little different than the needs of the implementers.
But you went from a music background. I mean, did you take coding in school? I mean,
no, not at all.
So you're completely self-taught.
Yeah, it's completely self-taught. It was just an accidental kind of luck. I sat down with a friend. We learned this program called Lotus 123. It was a spreadsheet, and it had a macro language where we could automate some of the process. And we thought, oh my God, that's so cool. So we learned it. And I did take some bought some books and sat down and learned some of the more usable languages and things like that. But I just found out I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. Used to solve a lot of my coding problems in my sleep. I had a pad next to my bed. I'd wake up and dream about it and then write it down, and then I'd test it, and by gosh, it worked. So it was really interesting. But I realized that there were people that really, really are unbelievable at this. They're just marvelous. And I think I found a more appropriate place for my skill set.
Is it not as kind of ridiculous a gap in some ways? I mean, is there components of a musical skill that applies in coding?
Well, we're told that musical people have a pattern recognition skill that has a fairly direct application in the technology space. I think the personality has some lends itself to it. I think there's a logic to music, certainly. I know there's a logic to music that for me has worked well when explaining to my clients real complex situations, being able to distill them down without just diminishing their value, down to something logical where they can make a decision on pursuing that technology. That's what the industry tells us that this.
Do you appreciate that for someone like me, playing an instrument professionally or writing software code is right up there with surfing 50-foot waves in Maui? Not going to happen. Did you appreciate you were taking kind of a jump from a very remote, exceptional world to a whole different remote, exceptional world?
That's a really interesting question, and I think that might be my superpower. Is I'm kind of fearless that way. I don't think about stuff.
You didn't think about that at all?
I really didn't. I just felt I could feel that there was a bit of an aptitude, and I felt that if I pursued it thoroughly, I would be okay at it. I wasn't really worried about it.
Okay, so you come from being a musician where at the end of a performance you get applauded enthusiastically every night. You go to an office where, as we all know, it's considered unseemly to be applauded. I remember at one of my last jobs, I called everyone into the conference room. People were clearly puzzled as to why. One of the lawyers, I know, it's always the lawyers, isn't it? He asked why he had to be there, why I was interfering with his day. I said we needed to acknowledge a brilliant job by someone else on staff, someone who had just signed us up for a big contract that would benefit the entire organization. And he looked at me totally puzzled and said, why? Was there an adjustment for you from going to where you were applauded, you got feedback, to an office?
Oh, yeah. That's a great question, by the way. And
Thank you. We do try here.
When I had the opportunity to manage people, I went out of my way to let people know when I really appreciated their work. And I learned that from a gentleman I worked with. He would start every meeting with, let's celebrate success. And we would go around the table. And initially it felt awkward because we never had any leader that would do that. But it became such a part of the culture of that team that occasionally he would forget to do that, and we would say, no, let's talk about success. We want to go through that process. And it was the best thing ever. It really set the tone and the attitude of that team by just taking a minute or so and talking about our individual successes or our team's successes. It wasn't so much about us, but the people we led. And so I really embraced that concept, I think for the very reason, as you point out, that I had the pleasure of being acknowledged at the end of every performance, and sometimes you don't.
Tell us about your time with the Villanova Band.
Really interesting set of circumstances. It was a non-degreed program. And so the gentleman that ran it, we did a few things together. He was a wonderful educator, and the Villanova Jazz Band had a kind of a rich history. Years back, it won some very prestigious festivals, and they were trying to kind of get it back on its feet. So he asked me to come in and work with that. These were all undergraduates that had music in their years prior to coming to Villanova and wanted to keep it in their lives. So they had pretty tough schedules. And so I was asking for more time from them. And so I was really appreciative of that. They did a great job. Some of them were just really very fine players. It was a great experience, great part of town. And the students I thought were just exceptional.
Now, you've mentioned your wife is also a musician.
She is.
Is that how you met?
We did. We met in college doing undergraduate work. So.
And what does she play?
She's a French horn player. She's very good, very talented.
Did she continue while you were working on software? Was she also still playing?
She played. She did a lot of work for Tony Bennett in Las Vegas. I have a really cute story that I always tell, that I dropped her off to play the show and went home, and she said, well, come pick me up. And so, of course, I go to the theater, pick her up, and she's holding her horn, and she's crying. And I'm like, are you okay? Of course. She goes, I'm fine. I said, what are you crying about? And she said, well, the last tune that Tony sang, he waved off the orchestra and just sang it alone, a cappella, and it was beautiful. And she said, it just touched me. And she said, I'm so glad I wasn't playing. It would have been really bad. So, but she doesn't play anymore. She's kind of put that aside.
What led to sculpting?
My dad took me to the World's Fair. I believe it was 1964-65 World's Fair
in New York?
New York.
Yeah.
And Michelangelo's Pietà.
You and I and 10 million other people were there, I think.
It's a small world, I think, was the Coca-Cola thing. And
it's almost like the 30,000 who's actually, according to stories, 42 million people who went to Woodstock.
That's right. That's right. 42. But I went and saw the Pietà. It was in like a plastic box, and you couldn't touch it, but I could get really near it. And it startled me at how amazing that one person could do that. And it the hands were made a little grotesque, so that when you step back, they looked normal, and the blue in the marble was utilized in some cases as veins. And I thought, holy cow, who thinks of this kind of stuff? It just overwhelmed me. So that really stuck with me. Now I don't pretend to be a Michelangelo by any sense. As a matter of fact, I have no training, so technique never gets in my way, But
that's never stopped you before.
It's true. But so it's just, I don't know, just was something I always wanted to try, but just didn't have the time to do it. And now I do, so I am.
Is it also nice at your point where you get to work with yourself, for yourself, and get to do what you want to do as opposed to what someone else is telling you to do?
Exactly. Yeah, I like that. And I like the problem solving of it, because sometimes you find yourself, you work yourself into a corner, and then you have to figure out how to get out, So, but I do like the fact that it's all me, and it's personal. It's really nice, quiet time, and and I go into the garage and I just kind of do my thing.
And it's keeping the creativity gene alive.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Creative people don't stop creating as they get older. It's in their DNA. Can you imagine a time when you're not making or perfecting or practicing, be it music or art? Is this kind of who you are?
I think so. I mean, I just feel like I'm discovering this stuff as I'm going. I don't think I sat down and wrote sort of a program for my life. I'm just not.
If you had, it would have been a really unusual program.
Yeah.
You know? I can imagine some sort of advisor going, oh.
Yeah. I try to just be available to what's around me, because I felt that as a young man, I was so absorbed in what I was doing that I really missed out on some of the world around me and being able to interact with it. So now I really go out of my way to try to do that.
Has being in the Lewis area, do you think, fostered your creativity?
I think it has. And I get the thing that is really, when I would play, I did a concert for the Lewis 250 organization on New Year's Day, and it was in the church on 2nd Street. It was wonderfully attended, and people loved the music, and they loved everything. And I thought, well, this is great. Look, they're enjoying the music that I'm playing. Isn't that great? And it really struck me in a big way that, yeah, they liked the music, but really what I was seeing was people connecting. And the music was just a reason to come together and connect. And I never really experienced that until I came to Lewis. And I think that's that's Lewis's superpower, is this desire to connect and a desire to create community, and give of ourselves and our time when we can to further that. So that's really opened me up in ways that I never anticipated.
Mario, thanks for talking with us today.
Thank you.
Thanks for taking us behind the scenes into a world that, well, for most of us is mysterious, mystical, and always memorable. And then there's your music. For the record, I think the world would be a far better place if more of us got some applause periodically at the workplace. Don't you?
Yes.
And in that spirit, will you join me in giving Steve a round of applause today? Thanks to today's sponsors. Remember, no one knows the Lewis housing market like Leanne and her team. They're considered the best because they are the best. And thank you for listening. As we've said before, without you, this would just be two guys sitting at a bar talking. Although with Mario, it'd be still a pretty damn interesting conversation. Until next time, from the heart of downtown Lewis, in our official recording studio in the beloved, beautiful Kindle restaurant. Hey, I'm not making that up anymore. We actually have a sign on the wall to prove it. This has been We and Lewis, the podcast. See you on the streets. And if you are like Steve and me, I hope you brought a towel.